The road was empty, swallowed up by the night. I could barely see the outlines of trees and fields rushing by as my car cut through the darkness. It was late. Too late, really, and I was more tired than I wanted to admit. The usual comfort of the night drive felt different tonight, though. Something hung in the air, thick and unsettling. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even though I knew it was impossible. There was nothing out here. No houses, no streetlights, just miles of black road and shadows stretching into the unknown. I tried to shrug off the feeling, focusing on the thought of getting home and collapsing into bed. I'd been on the road for hours, crossing into familiar territory, and my mind started to drift. Just then, a flash of red and blue lights burst to life behind me. My stomach dropped. I quickly glanced at my speedometer, convinced I hadn't been speeding, but the light stayed there, bright and insistent. This was a routine stop, I told myself, forcing calm into my thoughts. I slowed down and pulled over to the shoulder, the rough gravel crunching beneath my tires. The police car rolled up behind me, its lights cutting through the darkness, flashing in my mirrors. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I waited, listening to the silence around me. There were no other cars, no sounds, just the steady pulse of those lights and my own heartbeat, drumming faster with each second. The officer stepped out of the car, and immediately something felt wrong. His movements were slow and heavy, too controlled. As he got closer, I noticed he wasn't wearing the usual uniform. His clothes were rumpled, as if he'd thrown them on in a hurry. I tried to push away the uneasy feeling that started bubbling up inside me. "License and registration," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. I reached over, pulling my license from my wallet and fishing for the registration in the glove box. My hands shook a little as I handed them over, my eyes searching his face. His gaze was cold, piercing, with something lurking behind it I couldn't quite read. He didn't look at my documents. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally he leaned in closer, his face only inches from mine. "Where are you headed so late?" he asked, his voice like sandpaper. I swallowed, suddenly feeling a wave of fear wash over me. "Just heading home," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. He stared at me for a moment longer, his gaze hard and unblinking. Then without a word he turned and walked back to his car. The silence stretched out again, thick and heavy. I sat there frozen, waiting, but he didn't drive away. He just stayed there, his car idling behind me, lights still flashing, trapping me in their harsh glow. A chill crept down my spine as I realized I was completely alone, with no way to call for help and no other cars in sight. After a few minutes that felt like hours, he stepped out of his car again. My heart pounded as he walked back toward me, slower this time, his face hidden in shadows. Something in my gut told me to drive away, to get out of there, but I was paralyzed, too scared to move, too scared to even breathe. He reached my window again and leaned down. "You'll need to follow me," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for questions. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry as I tried to process his words. Follow him? I wanted to ask why, to understand what was going on, but the words stuck in my throat. There was a finality in his tone, like he wouldn't take no for an answer. My instincts screamed at me to lock the doors and floor it, but his stare kept me pinned in place, frozen in my seat. "Is there a problem, officer?" I managed to ask, forcing my voice to stay steady. For a second, he didn't answer. He just looked at me, his face unreadable, before he finally muttered, "Registration issue. I'll explain once we get off the road." I didn't believe him. I could see in his eyes that there was something else, something darker. But I nodded, too afraid to do anything else. He straightened up, motioning for me to start my engine, then walked back to his car, his shadow stretching out long and ominous in the headlights. I started my car, feeling trapped and vulnerable as I waited for him to move. After a tense moment, his car pulled onto the road, and I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. The night felt colder now, the emptiness around me pressing in. The highway stretched ahead, lined by towering trees on both sides, making the road feel like it went on forever. The patrol car in front of me moved at a steady pace, leading me deeper into the night. I glanced at my phone. No signal. Of course, out here in the middle of nowhere, I couldn't call for help even if I tried. The realization only tightened the knot of dread in my stomach. We drove for what felt like miles, leaving behind any trace of civilization. I could see the officer's silhouette in the car ahead, unmoving, almost like he was waiting for something. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, each one worse than the last. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that this was just a routine check, that I'd be on my way home soon. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was heading into something I wouldn't escape. Then, suddenly, the patrol car slowed, veering off the highway onto a narrow gravel road hidden by dense trees. I hesitated, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I could barely see the road ahead, just the faint glow of his taillights as he led me deeper into the woods. My mind raced, weighing my options. I could turn around now, speed off, and hope he wouldn't follow. But what if he chased me? What if he caught me? As the road grew rougher, I felt the weight of isolation pressing in. I was completely alone with a man I knew nothing about, miles away from any help. The gravel road twisted through the trees, winding through darkness that seemed to swallow up the headlights. The car in front of me came to a sudden stop, and I hit the brakes, my heart jumping to my throat. The officer got out, his shadow looming in the headlights as he started walking back toward me. His movements slow, deliberate. I felt trapped, like a rabbit in a snare, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. The gravel crunched under his boots as he approached, the sound unnaturally loud in the thick silence of the woods. I felt like I was in a cage, trapped by my own hesitation and fear. My hands trembled on the wheel, my heart racing as he closed the distance, his face still hidden in shadows. He stopped beside my window and leaned down, staring at me through the glass with eyes that seemed to pierce straight through me. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't the look of someone performing a routine check. This was something else entirely. "Step out of the car," he said, his voice even colder than before. Every instinct in me screamed to stay put, to lock the doors and drive off. But his eyes held me in place, leaving me no choice. My fingers fumbled with the door handle as I forced myself to open it, stepping out into the night air that felt colder than before. I tried to keep my composure, to remind myself that I hadn't done anything wrong. But his presence, the way he watched me without a word, made that confidence slip away. I was completely alone, deep in the woods, with no one to help me if things went wrong. "Put your hands on the hood," he ordered, his voice unfeeling. "What's this about?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. It sounded small, helpless. He ignored me, stepping closer until he was just inches away. I said, "Put your hands on the hood." His tone left no room for argument. Reluctantly, I did as he said, resting my hands on the cold metal of the car hood. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. This couldn't be a normal traffic stop. There was no backup, no radio chatter, just the silence of the woods and his eyes fixed on me. Then, I felt him patting down my pockets, his touch rough and invasive. "You're hiding something," he muttered under his breath, almost as if talking to himself. "No, I'm not," I stammered, barely holding back the tremor in my voice. "I'm just trying to get home." He paused, a smirk creeping onto his face. "Trying to get home, huh?" He laughed softly, the sound chilling in the empty night. "You sure about that?" I didn't know what he meant, but something in his voice made my blood run cold. I glanced up, trying to look for any sign of humanity in his eyes, but all I saw was a darkness that seemed to swallow the light. I felt completely exposed, like he could see straight into my mind, into my fear. What do you want?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. He leaned in closer, his face just inches from mine. "That depends," he said, his words slow and deliberate, "on how smart you are." A sinking feeling washed over me as I held his gaze, trying to decipher the meaning behind his words. The cold night air pressed in, thick with tension, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the way he looked at me, with that smirk, like he was savoring the fear in my eyes, silenced me. He took a step back, his eyes still locked on mine, and pulled something from his pocket. In the dim light, I saw it was a wallet. My wallet. When had he taken it? My mind raced, struggling to keep up with the situation as he rifled through it, inspecting my ID, my credit cards, my cash. He was in no hurry, as if he had all the time in the world. "Nice place you've got back home," he said, his tone casual, as though he were a friend commenting on my life. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, each word heightening the sense of violation. "Look, officer, I don't know what this is about, but if there's a problem, I'll come down to the station. I'll cooperate. Just let me go home," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. He let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "Oh, you think I'm a cop?" He laughed again, louder this time, and something in his voice sent a chill through me. He enjoyed this, watching me squirm, watching me piece together the truth. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. He wasn't a cop. I'd been following a complete stranger into the middle of nowhere. Panic clawed its way up my throat as I took a shaky step backward, my mind screaming at me to run, to get as far away from him as possible. But before I could move, he stepped closer, his face twisted with a dark satisfaction. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice dripping with mockery. "We're just getting started." I tried to keep my fear in check, but every instinct told me I was in serious danger. My eyes darted around, looking for any chance to escape, but the dense woods pressed in on every side, and the narrow road stretched endlessly into darkness. There was nowhere to go, and he knew it. He tossed my wallet back at me, and I caught it instinctively, though my hands were shaking. He watched me, his eyes gleaming with something that looked like anticipation, as if he enjoyed every second of my terror. "I'll give you a head start," he said casually, crossing his arms as he leaned against my car. "Let's make this fun, shall we?" It took a moment for his words to sink in, but when they did, the terror hit me in full force. He was toying with me, treating this like a game. I glanced down the road, knowing it was my only option, but fear rooted me in place. "Better start running," he said, his voice a low, dark taunt. Without thinking, I turned and bolted down the dark road, my footsteps pounding against the gravel, echoing in the quiet night. Every instinct screamed at me to run faster, but the weight of fear made my legs feel like lead. I didn't dare look back, didn't want to see his twisted smile or know how close he was. The only thing I could focus on was putting distance between us, hoping to find some way out of this nightmare. The trees loomed over the road, casting long, shadowed fingers across my path. The cold air cut into my lungs, each breath sharp and painful, but I pushed on, ignoring the burning in my muscles. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew that stopping meant certain danger, maybe worse. I had to keep going no matter how much my body screamed for me to stop. Behind me, I heard his slow footsteps crunching on the gravel, echoing eerily through the silence. He wasn't running. He was following at a steady pace, like he knew I couldn't get far. The sound of his footsteps sent a fresh wave of panic surging through me. This wasn't just a game to him. It was something he'd done before, something he knew I couldn't win. I veered off the road, plunging into the trees, hoping the darkness and thick undergrowth would hide me. Branches scratched at my arms and face as I pushed through the underbrush, the uneven ground making it harder to keep my balance. I forced myself deeper into the woods, ignoring the sting of branches and the burn in my legs. I just needed to get far enough that he couldn't see me, couldn't find me. The footsteps stopped. I froze, pressing myself against a tree, trying to quiet my breath, my heartbeat thundering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The silence was thick, almost unbearable, stretching out into the darkness. I strained to listen, waiting for any hint of movement, any sign that he was coming closer. But there was nothing, only silence. Maybe I'd lost him. Maybe he'd given up. Then from somewhere in the darkness I heard his voice, low, mocking, drifting through the trees. "You can't hide from me, I know you're out there." The calm in his voice made my blood run cold. He wasn't just searching, he was toying with me, drawing it out, letting me stew in my fear. I clenched my fists, trying to steady myself, but there was no escaping the truth. He was in control, and he was enjoying every second of this. I took a few cautious steps backward, trying to put more distance between us, careful not to make a sound. But as I moved, my foot slipped on a loose rock, sending it tumbling down the hill. The clatter echoed through the silence, loud and unmistakable. I froze, my heart stopping as I waited, hoping he hadn't heard it. But I knew better. "Oh, there you are," his voice called out, closer now, filled with dark satisfaction. The footsteps started again, faster this time, moving straight toward me. With no other option, I turned and ran deeper into the forest, my only thought to survive, to somehow escape his relentless pursuit. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees towering like dark giants, their branches clawing at me as I stumbled through the underbrush. My breath came in ragged gasps, each one sharp and painful in the cold night air. Every step felt heavier than the last, but I couldn't stop, not with him somewhere behind me, moving closer with every second. The ground was uneven, littered with rocks and fallen branches. I tripped, catching myself just before I fell, my hands scraped and raw. I pushed on, glancing over my shoulder, but I could see nothing through the blackness of the forest. Still, I could feel his presence like a shadow clinging to me, never letting me go. I didn't know how much farther I could run. My body was reaching its limit, every muscle screaming for relief. But fear kept me going, driving me forward even as exhaustion clawed at my legs. I knew if I stopped, if I hesitated for even a second, he would catch me. Ahead, I spotted a clearing bathed in faint moonlight, the trees giving way to an open patch of ground. I stumbled into it, my legs barely able to hold me up, gasping for air. The silence was overwhelming, the forest closing in around me, but I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I could hide here, blend into the shadows and wait for him to pass. I crouched down behind a fallen tree, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. I listened, straining to hear his footsteps, but there was only silence. Had I lost him? For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope. Then a sound shattered the quiet, a slow, deliberate crunch of leaves. My stomach twisted as I realized he was here, closer than ever. His footsteps echoed through the clearing, slow and unhurried, like he knew exactly where I was hiding. "Why are you running?" he called out, his voice taunting calm. "You know you can't get away." I pressed myself lower, clinging to the ground, every nerve on edge. He was so close I could hear his breathing, slow and steady, like he was savoring the moment. The darkness seemed to close in around me, the trees looming like silent witnesses to this nightmare. "Come on out," he coaxed, his voice gentle, almost mocking. "You've made this fun, but it's time to end it." I held my breath, trying to still the tremors in my hands. I couldn't let him find me, couldn't let him have this twisted victory. But as I looked around, I realized there was nowhere else to go. The clearing was open, exposed. If I moved, he'd see me, and if I stayed, he would find me. Desperation surged through me, giving me one last burst of energy. I reached down, grabbing a sharp branch from the ground, holding it tightly as I prepared for what felt like the final stand. I'd lost the option to escape. Now, all I could do was fight. I heard his footsteps draw closer, the shadow of his figure coming into view at the edge of the clearing. My heart pounded as I waited, every muscle tense, ready to strike if he came close enough. The moment stretched out, heavy with fear and adrenaline. Then he stepped into the moonlight, his face finally visible, a cold smile playing on his lips, his eyes dark with cruel amusement. "This is the end of the line," he said softly, almost as if savoring the words. But before he could make another move, I sprang forward, gripping the branch with all my strength and lunging at him, putting every ounce of fear, anger, and desperation into that one strike. He stumbled, caught off guard, but his strength quickly overpowered mine. The struggle was brief and chaotic, branches snapping, shadows shifting in the moonlight. I felt his grip tighten around my wrist, pain shooting through my arm as he wrested the branch from my hand. Just when I thought it was over, a sudden blinding light flooded the clearing, the roar of an engine shattering the silence. Headlights pierced through the darkness, illuminating both of us in their harsh glow. A car had pulled up at the edge of the clearing, and a voice called out, loud and urgent, "Hey, what's going on over there?" The man's grip loosened for a split second, his head snapping toward the lights. Seizing the chance, I tore myself free, stumbling back into the clearing as the stranger from the car ran toward us. My pursuer hesitated, his face flickering between anger and frustration, before he turned and disappeared into the trees, melting into the darkness as if he'd never been there. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, my entire body trembling with exhaustion and relief. The stranger knelt beside me, asking if I was all right, his voice filled with concern. All I could do was nod, too shaken to speak, as I watched the spot where the man had vanished, knowing he was still out there, somewhere in the shadows, waiting for another chance. Thank you for joining us on Dark Whispers. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell, so you're never alone in the dark again.